Hey there, I'm a big fan of the YouTuber Johnny Harris, but I really did not like his recent Russia video. I think it was sort of a missed opportunity. Let me say at the top that this video is probably motivated in some part by jealousy. I am super jealous of Johnny Harris's production values. I'm jealous of the size of his audience. What I enjoy the most about Johnny Harris's videos is probably the distinct style. He mixes the personal, history, maps, and on-the-spot gonzo reporting into an always cleverly produced mix. It's the kind of stuff I used to dream of producing before I realized that I much prefer to sit at home and complain about other people's reporting instead. The quality of Harris's videos is always top-notch, from the shooting to the animation to the editing. What's even better about his channel, and surprising for somebody who works with establishment outfits like Vox and the New York Times, is that he's often critical of US foreign policy. He's got an ongoing series called How the US Stole ... that's got millions of views. What's not to love? Well, his recent video on the Russia-Ukraine crisis is very much not to love. But before I get into it, I feel like I need to lay out my non-tanky credentials, lest you think I'm some sort of Russian stooge. The 2010s will be recognized as a horrific turning point in the post-World War II era. Nope, it's got very little to do with that guy. He made things worse, but it all started long before him. The 2010s marked the return of minor powers invading their neighbors to steal territory. Since 1945, the superpowers and a couple random psychos have tried and failed to conquer neighboring territory. But in the 2010s, we saw at least 4 minor powers try it out and largely get away with it. Putin's invasion of Ukraine is just as bad as the Turkish invasion of Syria and the Saudi and UAE invasion of Yemen that I spend so much time decrying on this channel. I devote more time to Yemen and Syria because those US-sponsored invasions have killed vastly more people. But Putin's invasion of Ukraine came first. And if he hadn't done that, I don't think Turkey or the Gulf monarchies would have gotten away with killing those hundreds of thousands of people. To clarify, the US and Turkey did start their destruction of Syria back in 2011, but Turkish President Erdogan didn't dare to de facto annex Syrian territory until 2016, after Putin set the precedent in 2014. Without Putin's Ukraine invasion, the world would be a much safer, happier place. Heck, the US defense budget would probably be half the size it is today if Putin had stayed out of Ukraine. I am far from being on Putin's side. In fact, I think he's an idiot. He walked straight into a trap laid for him by some of the dumbest people on the planet. The US military-industrial complex. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2014 opened Pandora's box. It set the world on a new, unstable path, just 2 years before the world's most powerful country lost its mind and elected Trump. Whether it takes 3 more days or 50 more years, history will probably record that the march to World War III started on the Maidan, or central square of Ukraine's capital, in 2014. That makes it vitally important to talk clearly about what happened. And what does the foremost independent politics YouTuber of our generation have to offer us? In a video seen by 4.6 million people and counting?
Again, it's like the boyfriend who genuinely loves his girlfriend. They had a great relationship, but they broke up, and she's free to see whomever she wants. But Putin is not ready to let go.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica. What the hell is wrong with you, dude? Don't fucking touch me.
I mean, maybe this video should be called Putin is just like your abusive ex-boyfriend.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica. What's wrong with you?
That's embarrassing. But what does Harris have to say about the epoch-defining invasion and annexation of Crimea?
It also takes the form of, oh yeah, stealing entire parts of Ukraine for Russia. He went down and just snatched this bit of Ukraine and folded it into Russia. He went down and just snatched this bit of Ukraine and folded it into Russia.
That's almost everything Johnny Harris has to say about the Crimea invasion and annexation in 2014. In a 22-minute long video that's ostensibly about the Ukraine crisis. He's just sort of like, oh, by the way, Russia blew up this decades-long consensus against invading your neighbor, but let's move on to why Putin is a bad ex-boyfriend. I hate to say it, but this Johnny Harris video is pure uncut propaganda. I read a great definition of propaganda recently in a book by a storied war correspondent. Propaganda often consists of credible lies designed to have maximum political impact. But these are atypical events. It is much more common for propaganda to consist of true but carefully selected facts, repeatedly publicized, that show one's own side in a positive light and one's opponents as the face of evil. It's possible to give publicity to these horrors with complete accuracy, but still give a distorted and propagandistic view of what is happening. If you only tell one side of the story, it's very easy to make the Russians look like cartoon villains. And that's exactly what Johnny Harris does here. Again, Russia's imperialist acts against its neighbor are no more forgivable than Turkey's or Saudi Arabia's. But we should maybe mention that Russia's invasion was a response to a violent coup, supported by the United States against a democratically elected Ukrainian president. The protests from November 2013 through February 2014 are never described as a coup in the Western press. The New York Times prefers to call it Euromaidan or the Revolution of Dignity, but it was totally a coup. The standard story seems to be that Yanukovych had promised to sign an agreement with Europe but then backed out at the last moment, so it was cool to kick him out. Well, Biden promised to end the war in Yemen and he lied about that. Does that mean it's okay for people to march on the Capitol and try to kick him out the way the Trumpists did on January 6, 2021? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that's not the way constitutions are supposed to work. The Ukraine protesters were, of course, younger, more sympathetic, and more energetic than the Trumpists. They protested for months, not just a day or two. They were celebrated and continue to be celebrated across all Western media. I use stock footage in a lot of my videos and subscribe to a service called Storyblocks for most of it. Storyblocks usually has pretty limited footage of geopolitical events and mostly just a few touristy clips of other countries. But I have tons to choose from when it comes to Ukraine's coup for dignity. The massive US support for these 2014 protests is often justified by a bit of time travel on Ukrainian public opinion.
It's becoming less and less attached to the Russian heritage that Putin so adores, and more than half of Ukrainians say that they'd be down to join the EU. 64% of them say that they would be cool joining NATO.
Yes, obviously, today, 8 years after Putin fell into NATO's trap and invaded, greater numbers of the Ukrainian public define themselves in opposition to Russia. I don't doubt Harris's numbers here at all. But that was emphatically not the case in 2014 when we were helping organize protests in this foreign country. Russia had a high approval rating in Ukraine, and even the Washington Post conceded that the support for joining Western institutions was comparable to the numbers of Americans today who believe that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. As the protests and the government response got more and more violent, the US doubled down on its support for the Maidan movement. Republican and Democratic US senators were on the ground in Kiev encouraging the protesters. And we went further than that. We picked the new government weeks before the popularly elected pro-Russia president was chased out. This isn't some far-left gray zone conspiracy nonsense. Thanks to Russian hackers, we have the recordings of these conversations, and you can read the transcripts on the BBC. I talked about this at length about a year ago. In 2014, Nuland was in charge of the Obama administration's policy in Ukraine. This conversation was leaked in February of 2014.
And, the EU.
So that's the bit that became most famous and made for better headlines, but I've always found the other part of the leaked conversation more compelling.
I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
In terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week.
You see, this was leaked before the coup in Ukraine actually happened. That was Nuland basically organizing the government that would replace Ukraine's popularly elected president after the 2014 coup. What followed our coup was the Russian annexation of Crimea and the death of thousands of Ukrainians in a Russian-supported uprising elsewhere in the country. This was the genesis of the first major shooting war in Europe since the 1990s, the solidification of Russia as a rogue state, and a fault line that still kills people to this day over 7 years later. And Nuland's name is on it directly. So I guess you would expect her to have been fired, right? If not for everything else, at least for offending the EU. Right? Hell no. Obama thought she was doing such a great job that he kept her there for another 3 years. And amazingly, Biden has nominated her to be one of his undersecretaries of state. She hasn't been confirmed yet, and that could prove to be difficult, but it is mind-blowing that she was even proposed. You really can't make this stuff up. As I've thought about this over the past year, I've become a lot less mystified by Nuland's continued success. She got the Biden administration job, by the way. From the perspective of Ukraine, Europe, the US taxpayer, and the interests of humanity, Nuland's continued rise is inexplicable. But when you consider the US government's main aim, selling weapons, it makes total sense. Victoria Nuland is one of the most successful US bureaucrats of the century so far. From Poland to formerly neutral powers like Finland and Switzerland to even Greece and Romania eventually, Nuland's Ukraine catastrophe has racked up billions upon billions of dollars for weapons sales. Putin's every move results in more and more money for US defense contractors and the US military, media, and Congress that those defense contractors own. I wouldn't be that surprised if Victoria Nuland ends up as Secretary of State one of these days. I don't have much sympathy for Yanukovych, the ousted pro-Russia president of Ukraine. He lost power because his reactions to the protest got violent and erratic. But if the US hadn't been heavily supporting those protests, would they have lasted long enough to create this reaction? Would 10 to 20,000 Ukrainians still be alive today if the US hadn't stuck their nose in? Why is the fact that the United States helped crush the Ukrainian Constitution in 2014 almost never mentioned? Well, it would ruin effective propaganda passages like this one.
If China suddenly showed up and started coaxing Canada into being a part of its alliance, I would be a little bit like, what's going on here? That's what Putin feels. And so I kind of get what he means there. There's a deep heritage and connection between these people. And he's seen that falter and dissolve, and he doesn't like it.
Okay, Putin, I get it. But this does not justify what you've been up to, okay? It doesn't justify sending 100,000 troops to the border, or sending cyber soldiers to sabotage the Ukrainian government, or annexing territory, fueling a conflict that has killed tens of thousands of people in eastern Ukraine. No.
What Harris just did there was mix and match bad things that Russia has done over the past decade, with absolutely no recognition of the things that the US and Ukrainian governments did to prompt these actions. Yes, Russia is undeniably the worst actor here, but if we want to avoid shooting wars in the future, it might be a good idea to find out how the almost infinitely more powerful West also participated in creating these problems. Of course, the main interest of US government and media is not averting war, it's selling weapons. And by telling one-sided stories like this one, Harris is helping the US government do exactly that. The most frustrating thing about Harris's video is the way that he perpetually gets so close to real criticism and critical thinking about the US position, but then refuses to follow through on it.
The West starts selling their ideology of democracy and capitalism and inviting them to join their military alliance called NATO. And guess what? These countries are totally buying it. All these ex-Soviet countries are now joining NATO, and some of them the EU, and Putin is hating this. He's like, not only did the Soviet Union divide and all of these people are now outside of the Russia motherland, but now they're being persuaded by the West to join their military alliance. This is terrible news. Over the years, this continues to happen while Putin himself starts to chip away at Russian institutions, making them weaker and weaker. He's silencing his rivals, and he's consolidating power in himself.
Beyond the fact that Harris's maps are just so much better than mine, he makes two really good points here, but completely fails to connect the dots. Over the past 25 years, as he points out with those really pretty maps, Russia has gotten more and more scared of an expanding NATO. And over that same period of time, it has opted to submit itself more and more to a strongman who fetishizes resistance and paranoia. Do you think there might be some relation between those two facts? After yesterday's speech, I'm getting more open to the idea that Putin might be unbalanced somehow, but the continued refusal to accept that we have a Russia problem, not just a Putin problem, is really frustrating. Putin's continued tenure in power is most likely a result of NATO expansion, not something that NATO expansion defends against. I'm pretty sure that if pro-democracy campaigner Alexei Navalny were to jump out of jail and take Putin's job, his policies on Ukraine would be very similar.
Quick note from the editing process. I want to lay it out a little more clearly. Vladimir Putin is a bad man, but I believe he owes his career, or at least the duration of his career, to NATO expansion. What Russia is doing to Ukraine is inexcusable, but I do not believe it ever would have happened if the United States hadn't inserted itself into Ukrainian politics. If the United States hadn't decided to support a coup against a democratically elected president in Ukraine, I believe that Ukraine would still be a sad, corrupt mess, but there would not be a war, and it would still be a united country.
By personalizing the Ukraine crisis and pretending that we're just dealing with Putin, the toxic ex-boyfriend, we avoid looking at our own role in creating these problems. And I don't think it's likely, but it's very possible that these problems will be killing tens of thousands of people by the time I publish this video. If we want to avoid contributing to shooting wars in the future, the kind of lightweight propaganda that Johnny Harris has produced here just isn't good enough. We need to learn what really happened, not develop more reasons for rooting for our side. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment to let me know what you think. Thanks.